Thanks for tuning into another edition of Another Dolphins Podcast. I hope everyone out there is chocolate wasted after a eventful Halloween. Boy, do we have a scary game to talk about. The Miami Dolphins are headed to Buffalo to face the Buffalo Bills after losing 5 of the last 6 games. Brian Cat, I want to get you right in here. Josh Allen is 12-2 in his career against the Miami Dolphins. Sunday's starting to feel like it's going to be a funeral, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last couple of weeks have been a funeral. I mean, it's going down to Buffalo and losing is kind of par for the course. The Dolphins have lost 12 of the last 13 games against Buffalo. And, I keep saying every week this is a must-win game. I said the Colts game was a must-win game. The Arizona game was a must-win game. I'm going to push it off one more week and say this is the must-win game here. That if pack it up, forget the season. It's over if you fall to 2-6 here, and that's where the Dolphins are right now. If you stun the world and you go into Buffalo and you win, and you get to 3-5, and then you look at the next 2 games against the Rams and Raiders and think those are winnable, then who knows? Maybe there's a outside possibility you turn this thing around. But yeah, I'm not feeling great heading into Sunday.
The Jets won on Thursday night to improve to 3-6, 3-5. I'm sorry, are they 3? I think they're 3-5 on the season now. My apologies about that. I got a stat here from Rich Samini I wanted to share with you, Kat. The Jets have an 18% chance of making the playoffs per ESPN Analytics. They're currently 10th in the AFC. At least one team has reached the playoffs after starting 3-6 or worse through 9 games in each of the previous 4 seasons. You have the Packers in 2023, the Rams in 2022, the Jaguars, Eagles, and Washington. The Dolphins are currently sitting at 2-5, entering this game against the Buffalo Bills. What do you need to see for the Miami Dolphins to start turning the corner? Because I think when we go back and we look at that Cardinals game, it was still hard. I think the longest play of the day was a 30-yard pass to Tyreek Hill. The offense really wasn't making these big, stretching the field type plays. I think they only have 16 plays of 20 yards or more through 7 weeks. That's a league low. So, Kat, what do you need to see from this team, specifically the offense, to think, all right, maybe if they were to go on a run, this is how it starts?
Well, one thing about the Cardinal game that I guess you can say is encouraging is that it actually looked like a game between 2 professional football teams, which we hadn't seen in a month. So that's good. And the Dolphins scored more points, 27, than they had all year. And that's what really hurts about the Cardinals game too, is that what we were hanging our hat on and the kind of our last ray of hope for the season is that Tua's coming back and the defense overall has been pretty good heading into that game. And then with one game, all of it's taken away. And when Zach Sealer got his eye poked out, was there any surprise that in the final drive, his absence would make the difference in winning and losing? That's just kind of how the season is going. So I can't remember what your original question was, but that's to turn it around. The Dolphins have to continue to run the football effectively because that is one thing that's going for them. They've had 150 plus rushing yards in their last 3 games, and the Bills are a team that tend to try to lull you to sleep a little bit in the first quarter or the first half. We saw that last week against Seattle, where it's 7-3 heading into with 2 minutes left in the first half, and then they come out and just paste them in the second half. That's kind of the Bills' style. So, they can the Dolphins match them when the Bills start heating up? I don't think so, but let's see.
Seattle Seahawks running back Kenneth Walker is a fantasy football player. He's kind of had the feeling as that he's been in the hunt for that RB1 this year, banged up with a couple injuries. I don't think he played when the Dolphins faced the Seahawks in week 3. I think it was actually Zach Charbonnet who had a touchdown or 2. Kenneth Walker last week, 17 carries for 32 yards and a touchdown. Kat, what makes this Buffalo team so damn consistent? Because every year, hey, they lost Micah Hyde, they lost Jordan Poyer, Matt Milano's gone for the year. The last 4 games, Von Miller was inactive, he was suspended. It doesn't seem to matter. Whatever the Sean McDermott scheme is, whatever this defense is, it seems like cornerbacks, physical, tough cornerbacks, grow on trees, and they're just a stout bunch no matter who's there.
Right. I mean, you look at lost Matt Milano for the year. That's a common thing with the Bills now, but and then Dorian Williams just steps in at linebacker. Balin Spector just steps in there at linebacker, and they don't really lose anything.
It's incredible.
They do, and both safeties, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, were there forever. Now they got Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin in there. Arguably, they've improved from last year at the safety position. That's the culture the Bills have. It's a culture of winning. It's a culture of players stepping up. It's the opposite of the Dolphins. The Dolphins are just excuses, one after another. Yeah, and in this game, the Dolphins are going to be without 5 of their defenders. They're going to be without Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Kader Kohu, Javon Holland, and Zach Sealer. They're going to be without half their defense. But nobody ever steps up. Last week was the week for Cam Smith to step up. And what does he do? He plays the most finesse style of cornerback that you could possibly play. The Dolphins have constant problems over the middle. It's not a culture of stepping up with the Dolphins defense.
That's definitely seemed like it's the case. You mentioned it, Zach Sealer. Mike McDaniel pretty much said that he will be out this week. Javon Holland dealing with a broken hand and a knee injury. He's expected to be out. Kat, I wanted to get your thoughts about the Cardinals game real quick because we saw Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride really step up in that second half. What do you think of Jaylen Ramsey's performance? Because it's really easy to watch the clips of whether it's that third down out route where Marvin Harrison was right where the ball needed to be. And then you had the play over the middle for a touchdown where Jaylen Ramsey was trailing him the whole play. A lot of people look at those and, we'll say Ramsey's cooked or Ramsey was the issue here. Man, it's so hard for me to look at those plays and look at that second half in general and see the Cardinals go on 3 different drives that were like 70 yards each. Man, the biggest issue with this defense, I think personally, is nothing to do with Jaylen Ramsey, nothing to do with the secondary. The pass rush just doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, last week Kyler Murray was sacked 0 times and hit 0 times. That's pretty much all that you need to know. Has Ramsey lost a step? He's approaching 30, so it's not a huge surprise. But he's also somebody that does his best work in zone coverage. And you look at that touchdown to Marvin Harrison, where Harrison ran all the way across the field. It had to be a perfect throw, and he had to have all day to throw it. So, no, I don't have a huge problem with that. I think Ramsey and Kendall Fuller that combination is one of the best things on the team right now. But the Dolphins need to get a pass rush here, and it's a shame that Chop Robinson is not providing it. And to go a step further, when you take a look at the players drafted around Chop Robinson now, you take a look at Brock Bowers was drafted 13th. How amazing would have been if the Dolphins, would you trade a second rounder to move up to get him now? He's, might set all-time records for tight ends. You've got that. You've got Jared Verse, who was taken 18th, who's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year. You've got Troy Fatana, who's looking great for the Steelers before he got hurt, taking 1 spot before. And then I believe 1 pick after the Dolphins, you had the number 1 player on my board at the time was Quinyon Mitchell. And Quinyon Mitchell is at cornerback looking great for the Eagles. And you see all these players stepping up and adding another wrinkle to their defenses. And you don't see that same thing with the Dolphins and Chop Robinson. And Chop Robinson currently has no sacks, no forced fumbles. Had a tackle for loss last week, a big one. But, it's time for him to step up.
I think he was close against the Cardinals, but that's kind of the issue with pass rushers, right? Because for so long they look so close and you're just waiting like, hey, Olivier Vernon, are you going to have that one game where you get the 4 sacks? Hey, Charles Harris, that spin move looks really cool, but when are you going to do it into the quarterback instead of right by them? And that's kind of the concern we see with someone like Chop Robinson. Mohamed Kamara is one player that, we do this podcast so much where it's so easy to, talk about a 5th round rookie. Like, hey, he's going to come in and do something and be a part of the team. Obviously, you're out kicking expectations a little bit. But are you surprised we've gone this far with all the different injuries? Bradley Chubb still not back. I think I read Emmanuel Ogbah is now playing through a torn bicep as well. Are you surprised that they haven't given Kamara a chance when you've seen the strengths and the weaknesses of other guys on display play after play?
Yeah, it's amazing to see what's happened at this edge spot for the last year.
Brutal.
It's shocking. I think he should play. Absolutely. But for some reason, for the last 3 years under Mike McDaniel, it's like the guy has to be a Pro Bowl superstar or he can't see the field. We see this with Channing Tindall. We see this with Cam Smith. It's like, and yeah, Chris Greer deserves a huge amount of blame for that. There's no doubt about that. But Why is it when we see these guys in preseason showing promise, there can't be a role carved out for them during the season? Same argument with Eric Ezukama for when he's been healthy. It's like, and here we are sitting here in 3 years of draft classes, albeit small draft classes, where you've got one good player. Actually, two good players, Jaylen Wright and Devon Achane, and they both play the same freaking position. So I don't know why you can't get these players on the field.
Oh my God, that's so sad now that you mention it. And it makes sense. McDaniel, the run game coordinator, if you're going to trust him to nail one position time and time again, he's absolutely great at that. But God, man, it is so frustrating. Like thinking back, the Dolphins have been in helpless situations, whether it's been in a game scenario or, God, 2-5 is pretty close to helpless for a season. Like, can you remember a stretch where Channing Tindall just got like 6-7 snaps in a row? Just even if they were bad, like I think we're at a point in the season, like just give the opportunities. Like we're not at a point where, hey, we got to make sure like we have David Long Jr. out there being an absolute stud. That's another guy I wanted to ask you about. My God, I don't know if I was being overly focused on someone like David Long, but looking at his performance last week, I just don't know how the Miami Dolphins could get any worse. I think he had 4 missed tackles, 8 for 8 in coverage, and I think Vic Fangio said at the start of the season, linebackers just can't come out and be tough and think you're a good linebacker. There's so much more involved, and every time Vic Fangio talks about linebackers, man, I think he's just talking about David Long and the fake tough guy persona and things like that, because it seems like he was someone who's supposed to come in, be that physical presence like a Landon Roberts was a few years back, and he's just last year was solid, but this year, man, it's ugly.
Yeah, he's terrible. I mean, and to go a step further with that, it's even worse that the Dolphins strategized to have Jordan Brooks and David Long basically playing 100% of the snaps, and also having Jordan Poyer at strong safety. If you couldn't look at that and see that that is a slow middle of the defense, I don't know what to tell you. A lot of players, I mean, really the nickelback position and the dime back position have become starting positions in the NFL. The Dolphins said, no, we're smarter than you. We're going to go the other way on that. We're going to put 2 inside linebackers who can't run with people out in the middle of the field all game. So, no, it's David Long Jr. has been terrible, and it's hard to even get mad at the guy because he is who he is. He is an undersized, thumping, 2-down linebacker who also happens to get hurt a lot and miss a lot of tackles. That's a lot of things in the negative column for David Long Jr., unfortunately. So, but on the other side, too, I wish I could have more optimism at this point for Channing Tindall. But 3 defensive coordinators for the Dolphins in the last 3 years have agreed that he's unplayable on defense. So, it's there's so much blame to go around, and Channing Tindall is emblematic of that.
Josh Allen on the season, 14 touchdowns and 1 interception. Kat, the idea in the past was, hey, Josh Allen, he might throw 3-4 touchdowns, but maybe you can get a couple turnovers. The Dolphins almost won that playoff game in Buffalo a few years back, just doing that, making sure we fall on the couple fumbles we're going to see every game. And then, Kat, I'm just going to dump some stats on you. You got Khalil Shakir leading the team with 36 receptions on 38 targets, which is absolutely insane. Keon Coleman, rookie wide receiver, he's coming on strong with a team-high 3 touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid has a team-high 44 targets, but quote-unquote only 28 receptions. Man, just looking at how the Buffalo Bills can operate the middle of the field, I haven't even mentioned James Cook yet, who I think averaged 10 yards per carry and scored 3 touchdowns when these teams played in week 2. Who do you look on at the defense to say, hey, somebody, if you could hold up in the middle of the field to try to just maybe make not start of the game to the end of the game, just a couple plays. We saw Jordan Brooks do it at the goal line. If Javon Holland was out there, I could see him being that guy that just, hey, once in a while on that 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5 year, that guy that steps up on defense that makes the play. But with everyone sidelined, man, who are you looking at that say, hey, maybe you can make a play here to get that Bills offense off the field?
Yeah, and the sad thing, Jake, is that Josh Allen has basically done nothing over the last 2 games against the Dolphins. I mean, in week 2, Josh Allen threw for 139 yards. Yep. The issue is that the Dolphins turned the ball over more times in the first half, 3 times, than the Bills have all year. So you're not winning football games like that. And as far as the weapons are concerned, they don't have a dynamic Pro Bowl threat on their team. Yeah, they got Amari Cooper, but Amari Cooper's also iffy for this game. But you take a look at Keon Coleman brings size. Khalil Shakir brings the ability in the slot. Dalton Kincaid is your move tight end who can get away from linebackers. You also got Johnny Knox in there, Dalton Knox in there somewhere. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of times too where they say, okay, defenses say, okay, we're going to stop Josh Allen. Go ahead and beat us with James Cook if you want. And the Bills say, okay, fine, we will, and they do. So you've got 4 or 5 weapons that really know their role well in the Bills' offense.
The Dolphins defense has just 9 sacks on the year. The Buffalo offense has allowed 10 sacks this season. When you think about that alone, Kat, the idea, hey, let's pressure Josh Allen, let's push him into mistakes. How does this game play out when the Dolphins can't pressure Josh Allen? Is he just going to sit in the pocket all day? Is it going to maybe, luckily a scenario where Josh Allen isn't used to having that little pressure where maybe he panics? How do you see that unfolding? I doubt it's the second way I said that.
Yeah, and also, too, in the last 2 games against Josh Allen, I don't think the Dolphins have created a lot of pressure. So that could be a good thing that, they've shown the ability to contain Josh Allen over the last 2 games without having to pressure him all that much. And I may laugh at that and the Dolphins still lost those games, and they did lose those games. But I think they've done pretty well against him the last couple of games. That's got to continue. But obviously having a pass rush is better than not having a pass rush.
Oh, the Dolphins spend so much money on that pass rush, man. It's just, it's so depressing. It's just and the kicker is you just get 6 days, week after week, just to stew on these things, the issues against the Cardinals. Let's flip the coin here. Let's talk about this Miami Dolphins offense and see how they can get any sort of anything going against the Buffalo Bills. Kat, last week we saw Devon Achane carry the ball 10 times for 97 yards on the ground, along with 5 receptions, about 50 yards and a touchdown as well. Obviously the best performance we've seen from this offense, but you look at Tua Tagovailoa, the 3 fumbles. You can't be making mistakes like that against a team like the Buffalo Bills. Otherwise, it's going to be like we saw in week 2, 31-10 before you're even blinking.
Yeah, I mean, look, I thought Tua, upon his return, may have looked a little rusty, but I thought overall he looked pretty good, and I thought he was protected really well. That wasn't a surprise. We talked about it in the pregame last week where, Arizona was missing their entire defensive line and their best pass rusher. That's not going to be the case against the Bills this week. Gregory Rousseau has been fantastic this year. Von Miller and A.J. Epineza also destroyed the Dolphins. Really, the Bills' entire defensive line destroyed the Dolphins' offensive line, which otherwise has played a little bit better than I thought they would this year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got to be really a revenge game for this Dolphins offensive line, and continuing to run the ball downhill and keep doing that. And just, it's shocking. Against Arizona, Jaylen Wright, Devon Achane combined for 9.5 yards a carry on 12 attempts. I mean, some of that too is that, okay, on first down, you had some losses. You had a lot of 2nd and 11, 2nd and 9. I understand that, but to always clear out the backfield or always go into, okay, we've got to take the top off this defense mode. That's been figured out with the Dolphins now. So, yeah, running downhill and working off play action more often and just playing in control is where the Dolphins need to live.
Jaylen Wright has played 9 snaps over the last 2 weeks. Kat, do you want to guess how many yards he's averaging per snap? Not even carry. Do you want to, every time he's on the field, this is the average amount of yards the Dolphins get?
7.
Right. He's at 6. It's like 5.7, dude. It's absolutely insane to me. And if you go look back, there were some trick plays. Like the Dolphins had a package for Jaylen Wright. One of his whopping 2 runs was Tua hit him with the ball behind the back. What are your thoughts on this this running back food chain the Dolphins are working with, where Devon Achane does a little bit of both? He's going to get some carries. Kind of looks like RB1 for the sake of he's on the field first, followed by some passes or some receptions as well. But Raheem Mostert, 2 rushing touchdowns, but didn't do too much else. Are you happy with how that food chain looks, or you want to see Jaylen Wright maybe leapfrog Raheem Mostert in that lineup?
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I mean, to me, especially on a team that's 2-5, I'd like to see more. I'd like to see Jaylen Wright on the field with Devon Achane. Mm-hmm. It seems so easy that you should get some looks like that with how well Achane is catching the ball and how well he's creating plays in space. Genu Smith has done a good job, I think, the last 2 weeks as well. The Dolphins have weapons and they have options, and they have an offensive line that's blocking reasonably well too. So I'm interested to see if they can go up to Buffalo and they can put up 27 points again. My guess is they probably won't, given that anytime the Dolphins have had anything positive go on this year, the next week we're wondering where that went. So let's see if they can carry that offensive momentum up to Buffalo.
The Bills, this is something you already mentioned, but are truly one of the best teams at limiting big plays. Tyreek Hill, whether on the Chiefs or the Dolphins, has never reached 100 receiving yards against the Buffalo Bills. Kat, shouldn't that be Jaylen Waddle's bat signal out in the sky, or the penguin signal, whatever you want to call it? That's one player, man, where for everything that's gone wrong, I understand that Tua hasn't been there, and Waddle is a completely different player, chemistry or whatever other reason you want to throw out there, that he's a different player with Tua out there. But man, 4 for 45 with 2 drops sprinkled in, that's unacceptable.
Yeah, and I believe both of those drops happened in the first half. And kudos to Jaylen Waddle for responding with 2 big catches down the stretch. So I'm encouraged by the way he bounced back in the second half last week. So, but yeah, and the thing is Buffalo does nothing special on defense. They play cover 4, they play cover 6, they make you throw into tight zones, and they make you block their best pass rushers. The Dolphins have been unable to do that really if not the last 3 games, the last 6 years, where the Bills come in regardless of who they have, and Sean McDermott just knows how to push the Dolphins' buttons by getting to the quarterback. So that's where it has to start and stop with. If Tua goes up to Buffalo and gets pressure throughout the game, this game's over.
Oh, it'll be over before it starts. We were talking about the Buffalo Bills culture. Kat, Josh and I talked about this, and I think we maybe went a little overboard talking about the Tua comment. It looks a little different when you're at home eating chips comment, which, shrug it off, I'm going to have some fun with it. But what were your thoughts on when you want to talk about culture and developing a system? What's the point of bringing up Aaron Brewer when talking about that snap? I mean, we say that the Dolphins offensive line has been like an unsung hero of the group, and Aaron Brewer is right at the start of that. I don't think he's allowed a sack this season, a handful of pressures at the absolute most. That just seemed like a very weird thing to do when you have this guy who came in from the Titans, limited snaps at center, he comes in and doesn't miss a beat. It just seems strange that's a hill that Tua wants to die on.
Yeah, as far as the culture is concerned, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's with the Bills, it's a culture of stepping up. It's a guy goes down, a player seemingly comes in and does better all the time. They lose Stephon Diggs. They're better passing the ball. They're at least more efficient passing the ball this year. Defensively, they lose Matt Milano. They get somebody that steps right in there, Dorian Williams, and they don't miss a beat. Tre'Davious White, they lost for the year last year, and now he's a backup with the Rams. And, Christian Benford and several other players on their defense, Teron Johnson, Jamarcus Ingram. These guys step right in there. The Dolphins don't have that. They have excuses. Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb go down for the year, and we can't get to the quarterback. What more can you do? There's not that culture of stepping up.
Got an email here before we get into our prediction here, Kat, I want to share with you. This came in from Jose, and it's just captioned frustration. Big Miami Dolphins fan right here, got the logo tattooed on my knee. This team has huge issues. I believe the culture is way too liberal with the players. Feel like the big name paid players are there for other reasons and not to win championships. The culture that Coach Mike has brought to the building makes that worse. No discipline. The same problems keep happening that have not been resolved for years. Miami is a city with way too many distractions and a very lavish lifestyle. We need a strong discipline, accountability. We need a head coach that is a hybrid of Brian Flores and Coach Mike if we ever want to sniff a playoff win, let alone a championship. Coach McDaniel's fundamentals are not what they're supposed to be a championship team. I listen to your podcast every time you upload something. My favorite chips are Buffalo blue cheese, which sound pretty awesome. Jose, thank you for your email. Kat, I have always such a hard time just going like a team's too soft. We're not in the building. We're not there. We can't really sit there and say a team, we don't know what the culture is. But with this Dolphins team, I just turned 30 a month ago. I'm ready. I'm ready to lean in and say just the culture needs to be better. You need people to be held responsible for these different scenarios. And I kind of think Jose hit the nail on the head.
No, that was a great, from beginning to end, I couldn't agree more. And if you don't want to say the team's soft, I will say the team's soft. They're soft. They constantly don't step up. What is the biggest game the Dolphins have won since going 3-0 against Buffalo in 2022? September 25th, 2022. Maybe the Dallas game on Christmas Eve last year.
Cowboys game ever.
And how many times do we sit here? How many big games have there been where Mike McDaniel's at the podium saying he didn't have this team ready? This team comes out, they get punched in the mouth repeatedly. I mean, look, the unfortunate truth is there is one game that I circle in the past several regimes for the Dolphins that I circle and I say that's the game I knew this is never going to happen. All right, with Brian Flores, it was that Titans loss where they lost 31-3 after winning like 7 in a row against Ryan Tannehill, and you just basically needed this game to get in the playoffs, and you just get punched in the mouth. Before that, it was for Adam Gase, it was the Bengals game where the Dolphins started off 3-0, then got smacked by the Patriots, and then went to Cincinnati and blew a 17-point lead, and then Ryan Tannehill got hurt. You knew they weren't going to make the playoffs, and this was over after that. In that Bills game in week 2, it was a combination of everything that's wrong with this football team. Tua getting hurt, coming out and having 3 turnovers in the first half, not even forcing Josh Allen to beat you, showing no toughness to a team that puts you out of the playoffs in a game you should have won the previous year, Tua getting hurt on a play that he knows he absolutely can't make. If he puts his head down and runs it into a defender, it's national news. And you see players, which has become my biggest pet peeve, is you see players just laughing it up on the sideline in the fourth quarter. That's when I reached the point where I said, I don't think it will ever happen with Mike McDaniel on the sideline.
I was disappointed when Tua was like, well, I was on a team that started the year 1-7 and we came back. Well, no, you didn't come back. You got punched in the mouth by the Titans in that game. It just seems like this Bills game upcoming, I never felt, I agree with all those games. I never felt like it was the result was already predetermined like it is kind of for this Buffalo game. It kind of feels like the Bills know where the Dolphins are at. The Dolphins feel as helpless as possible. Tua, the lack of urgency. We got time, brother, talking about these past teams and all this. I mean, it just feels unacceptable. It just feels like we see this big wall that we're going to try to drive right through, and it's not going to happen. And Buffalo is going to come out on Sunday ready for a funeral, man. And I just feel like the Dolphins, for one reason or another, are ignoring that. Hey, we got time. We know we can beat Buffalo. We just got to play our game. No, it's a lot more intense than that.
Well, they've all gotten paid, and that's my issue too. Well, yeah, Tyreek Hill can say, oh yeah, we're going to come out and beat the crap out of the team next week. Yeah, Tyreek Hill gets paid almost $2 million a game. And look, he's earned that. But now you have a team full of veteran players. The Dolphins headed into the season as the oldest team in the league, who have gotten paid. And then you sprinkle into that they don't have enough players coming up to really challenge for those spots too. So I don't like to try to get into the psychology of the team either. Look, but when you are constantly not winning games that you should be winning, or that games that you need to have to turn things around or to make a statement, and you constantly for 2 calendar years can't do it, what other conclusion can you reach other than the team is not tough enough and they're not focused enough?
Kat, is there any hope for Sunday? Do you have any hope? Give me a percentage of hope.
10%, only because, the Bills they've won 3 in a row in the last 2 weeks. They've beat the Titans and the Seahawks by 3 scores. And Seahawks and Titans are 2 teams that also pasted the Dolphins this year. Is it possible they come in a little bit overconfident in this game? Is it possible that, the Bills, which they sometimes do, kind of lull their way through the first quarter and maybe the Dolphins can hit them with 2 quick touchdowns? And yeah, I guess it is possible. But at the end of the day, no, I think the Bills are going to win their 13th out of 14 games against the Dolphins here over the last 7 years. And I'm going to go 37-20 Bills.
A little bit of a fight. I like that. I think I just see 31-10 again. I just see a scenario like that where you're just helpless through and through. Now, I'm not rooting for any of this, but Kat, do you see a scenario where if Miami gets killed, do you see any like Monday or Tuesday type news, major changes? Not necessarily anyone losing their job, but Mike McDaniel, I'm giving up play calling duties, or some sort of just major shakeup if the Dolphins do lose on Sunday?
I think it's too late for a shakeup if they lose on. I mean, any shakeup would have to be in the form of the trade deadline on November 5th. But that's kind of the situation, the unfortunate situation the Dolphins are in, where if you're another team, are you going to trade for Tyreek Hill? Are you going to trade for Jaylen Ramsey, knowing that they're 30 plus and knowing how much money that they make and what salary you'd have to take on? Probably not. I mean, that was, we've been sitting here for the last 2 years saying, man, look at all these stars, look at all these players the Dolphins have. The other side of that is this is your team. Yeah. And I don't see any getting out of that until at least 2025 or at least 2026.
Kat, perfectly said. This team is depressing as all hell, but I always appreciate doing this show with you. It's always a lot of fun. Thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. I hope we live in some sort of fantasy world where we come back Monday to talk about a victory Monday. Not feeling too great at all, though, but I hope everyone has a great weekend. We will be back with a new show soon. And most importantly, spin it up.